Alright, so we're starting the third turn, which is the 1 p.m. turn. The French win the initiative and choose to move first. And you can see that basically they're just going to continue their advance. One thing that did happen on the left is that the brigade of infantry screened by skirmishers that was part of the 5th Division, instead of moving to rejoin the forces moving toward the crossroads, is now going to move forward to engage the troops at Bosal Woods. One of the things that happened here was this meant that a total of 5 out of 8 French brigades are now engaging the Bosal Woods, which are just held by 2 brigades of Nassau infantry. It certainly gives the French a preponderance of weight and firepower over there, but it does mean that they've got an awful lot of troops going into really dense terrain. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and make the moves, and then we'll go ahead and see where everybody ended up. Alright, so here's the French position after their movement. You can see that on the left they are moving through the fields around Pierrepont toward Bosal Woods, but it's definitely slowing down their movement. I have removed the actual building from Pierrepont, so there's room for the troops. Remember that in the game, single buildings have no impact on the game, only actual towns do, so that can be moved out of the way as necessary and replaced once there's more room for it. So in the center, they have moved forward with 2 brigades in column and their skirmishers, which has pushed the skirmishers back. Also, the French cavalry has moved around the lake and are positioning themselves for a charge. Now, because of their position, because they're within 1 action, which is 3 inches of the troops there, they could, the Dutch-Belgian troops could go ahead and make a reaction roll to try to form square. They're not going to do that this time because they know they've got the second movement in this turn, so they'll be able to form square easily that way. Also, of interest right now, all of the French artillery, all 3 batteries are out of position. None of them can fire because they have started moving forward to get in better position. The left-hand battery is actually going to be in the field for a while, and the right-hand batteries are going to have to move for a while until they can find a new firing position. Alright, so that's where it's at. I'll go ahead and dismount the camera and we'll take some close-ups of what's going on. Alright, so the only combat that takes place during the French players' movement is going to be between the skirmish screens. Both of them fire. In this case, the Dutch-Belgians fire first. They miss. The French skirmishers actually hit, and they are able to inflict a casualty on the Dutch-Belgian skirmishers. So we mark that. They do take a morale test, but they're fine. Everything else is basically in the same position. Now, one thing I need to point out was there was a battery of Dutch-Belgian artillery on the road here. They were supposed to move forward last turn, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And then in the upcoming turn, they'll be able to move again. Alright, I just wanted to point that out real quick. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and indicate what goes on with the Allied first turn, or Allied movement, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so the Allies' turn 3 movement was limited to withdrawing the conscripts back toward Quatre a little bit and forming square because they do know that the French cavalry is right there. Skirmishers withdrew with them to protect them. The battery that was on the road did move forward and was able to attach to the square, which gives them additional firepower. And then over in the Bosal Woods, the Dutch-Belgian horse artillery battery that had been silenced last turn was able to move forward. In this case, it moved over to the right flank so that it can start to engage the French columns as they come up. And I'll go ahead and show you some close-ups of what went on. Alright, so here on the French right flank, the Allied left, the conscript brigade has formed square, and it has an attached battery now. The skirmishers drop back. Now the artillery battery attached to the square can fire through the skirmishers. That's a change in the rules. It's in 4.2. Basically, the assumption is that the skirmishers know there's a battery behind them, and they leave a narrow corridor for the battery to fire through. But instead of having the same wide arc of fire that a battery has, it can only fire straight ahead. But in this case, firing from the front of the square, it can fire through the skirmishers and add its fire potential against the French skirmishers. That would give them a 20% chance to hit, and in this case, they were successful. So they were able to inflict a casualty on the French skirmishers. All right. Over here on the Allied right flank, the horse artillery battery that moved forward through the woods, it only has one point of fire, so it has to fire at the skirmishers. It can't fire through them. So in this case, it fires and misses, so there's no impact there. So that ended the Allied. And also, I'm sorry, over here the French fired back but missed the skirmishers this time. So that ended the combat of the third turn. So now we're going to go into turn number 4. Alright, so at the start of turn number 4, which is the 2 p.m. turn, the Allies were able to win the initiative and they chose to move first. Now they have off-board reserves that are scheduled to come on next turn. But because we started the game early, I decided to allow the off-board reserves a 50% chance of coming on early, troops marching to the sound of the guns, because they can hear the fight going on. So in both cases, the Allies were able to bring their off-board reserves on. Now the only fire that takes place again is going to be the skirmishers shooting at each other and the artillery in the Balsao Woods firing out. So I'll go ahead and give you a couple close-up shots of that. Alright, so one of the reinforcing units was the British 5th Division, which came from Brussels, and it consists of a brigade of Highlanders, a battery, a brigade of regular line infantry, and a brigade of Hanoverian conscripts. There's also a lieutenant with them, which gives them the second lieutenant on the board. And then coming from the west, we had 2 stands, 2 brigades of Dutch-Belgian cavalry, the 2nd Dutch-Belgian Cavalry Brigade. They came from the west and moved on. Both of these reinforcements headed toward the center. The only combat that occurred was here in the center. And in this case, the French fired first, which gave them their shot against the skirmishers. They were able to hit the skirmishers, and the second hit eliminated the unit, and that happened before they could fire back, so these guys are taken off the board. The only the only other fire that's going to take place is over here, where the battery that's in the woods, now it is not moved during this turn, so it's able to fire at full effect. It can fire 4 points against the skirmishers. It go ahead and rolls, and it's able to inflict a casualty on that skirmished infantry. I'll go ahead and mark them. Alright, so that was all of the fire and movement for the Allied side. So now we're going into the French turn, or the French movement phase of this turn. Alright, so we're in the French player, or the French player of turn number 4. Over on the left, the French will continue moving toward the Balsao Woods. In the center, the arrival of that Dutch-Belgian cavalry and the British infantry division has given the French infantry pause, and they have decided that they are going to wait until their supporting artillery can move up. However, the cavalry division has been ordered to charge the conscript square. So we'll see how that turns out. Alright, so here's the position after the French turn 4 movement. Over on their left flank, you can see they've moved 3 stand of skirmishers right up to the Balsao Woods so they can start engaging in fire. They've backed them up with 2 brigades of French infantry in column and a brigade of French infantry in line, although their 4th brigade over on the far left flank has been slowed down by the woods, so it's not going to be able to do much this turn. In the center, They have nothing really going on. The French did declare a cavalry charge. Unfortunately, their command role was such that they failed the charge. All that happened was that the cavalry had to advance toward the enemy, which would have put them right up here and would have blocked the fire of this heavy battery. Bad command roles can stop all kinds of good stuff. Alright, so I'll go ahead and do some close-ups and we'll talk about what happened. Okay, so over on the French right flank, as I said, their cavalry charge did not go in, and their movement of the cavalry did actually block their heavy battery, which had moved forward a little bit. So during the defensive fire phase, the Dutch-Belgian gun, which is attached to the square, is allowed to fire. It's at effective range against the cavalry, which would have given it 4 points to fire, but because it's attached to a square, it only gets to fire half in any one direction. So it has a chance to, and it was able to inflict a casualty on one of those two cavalry brigades. And then, unfortunately, the cavalry brigade rolled a bad morale roll, so they were marked yellow. They are now shaken. So we replace it with the yellow casualty cap. Alright, there's no fire here because of the range. Over here, we've got the defensive fire. We've got two stand of Nassau infantry and a battery that are firing. They have to split their fire between all three stands, but even with that, they're able to inflict an additional casualty on one of the skirmish stands. Firing back, the three stands of skirmishers would be firing at 6 points total. It's halved because the targets are in the woods, so that becomes only 3 points. The 3 points against the, and that has to be split. So they did 2 points against the infantry and 1 point against the artillery battery. They did hit the infantry, so it took a second casualty. Alright, that was the only combat that took place during this turn. So we'll go ahead and get set up for turn 5, which is the 3 o'clock turn. So here we are at the start of the 3 p.m. turn. The Allies were able to retain the initiative and they chose to move first. Now they did have 4 p.m. reinforcements scheduled and they were able to bring those in. So those are going to be the Brunswick Corps, which is coming on the board to your right. Also very important, the Duke of Wellington arrives on the field to take command, which is going to make commanding and controlling this increasingly large Allied force much easier. And what you're seeing is they are sending the Brunswick Corps toward the Bassau Woods to back up the Nassau troops that are hard pressed right now. In the center, they're going to deploy their, it looks like they're going to deploy their infantry division that just came on last turn. They're going to deploy them to back up the conscripts south of the square or south of the crossroads, and they're going to bring up the light cavalry to protect their right flank between the Bassau Woods and the crossroads. In the Bassau Woods itself, they are going to go ahead and withdraw to go ahead and give ground to delay the French that are moving into the woods. So I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like after movement. So here's the battlefield after the Allied player movement. Over in the Bassau Woods, you can see that the Nassau troops were able to withdraw, although only a little ways, but it brought them away from the edge of the forest, which means they're no longer a target for those skirmishers. The French will have to move up. And they were also able to bring their 2nd Brigade over to back up the lead brigade. In the center, the Dutch-Belgian cavalry were able to move off the road and position themselves between the crossroads and the Bassau Woods, which means they're securing the right flank of the new British line, which has been established behind the square. Now, the square did attempt to move. It can't come out of square because the French cavalry is still there, but it did try to move so that it could maybe get out of the way. Unfortunately, it rolled a poor command roll and ended up being stuck where it was. So the only other thing that happened was that Wellington, of course, is going to move forward. The Brunswick troops started moving toward the right flank, and the Brunswick cavalry has actually moved toward the center so that it can link up with the Dutch-Belgian cavalry that's already on the board. Alright, so I'll go ahead and give you some close-ups and we'll talk about what happened in the fire phase. So as I mentioned, on the right flank, there's going to be no combat because the Nassau player has moved further back into the woods. No fire there. In the center, we have the Dutch-Belgian cavalry that has moved up. We have the British who have established a new line behind the conscripts that are in square. Wellington has moved up into the center of the crossroads. The Brunswick cavalry is moving to join the Dutch-Belgian cavalry, and the rest of the Brunswickers are moving toward the right flank. So in combat, all that really happened was these two batteries fired. The French batteries are not in a position where they can do anything right now. So the gun that was attached to the square fired at its same target again and got a second hit. 2 hits on a 3-figure stand eliminates it, so it's gone. And over here, the horse battery, or rather the British foot battery that came on board, it fired at the cavalry as well, but it missed. So the only thing that had to happen was these 2 cavalry brigades took panic tests, but they were fine on both of them. Alright, so that concludes the Allied player turn of turn number 5. So now we're getting ready to do the French player turn. So we're now starting the French movement of the 5th turn. And in a surprise move, the French player has chosen to stop his assault on the town, and instead looks like he's going to sidle his infantry over to the right and establish a new line. He's ordered his cavalry to pull back. Over in the Bossau Woods, they're going to continue to move forward. And at the far left, you can see that the reinforcing Cuirassier Brigade has come on, and that means that they also get another lieutenant because they have sufficient brigades on the board for the extra lieutenant. All right. So I'll go ahead and finish their movement, and then we'll take a look at it. All right, picking up after the French player movement, we can see that over on his left flank, he was able to advance into the Bossau Woods with his skirmishers, but he didn't get much deeper than that. He was able, on the road, you can see he's finally got that battery into action, so it's going to be able to fire. On his right flank, he was able to back his cavalry out of the way, and he was able to start moving his infantry to the right, although he didn't get as far as he was hoping. He was able to get both of his guns on that flank unlimbered, so they'll be firing this turn. On the Allied side, they're going to fire first, so the 2 batteries that they have near the crossroads will fire, and in the woods, of course, the battery and the infantry brigade that is deployed there is going to be able to fire as well. All right, so I'll go ahead and give you some close-ups, and we'll talk about what happened. All right, during the Allied defensive fire, the 2 batteries deployed near the town both targeted that lead column that was right there. They had a 30% chance of inflicting a hit, and they rolled a hit on it, so we'll go ahead and mark that. And they were able to pass their morale test. Over on the right flank, the guys up in the woods, they're firing again. They still have the same 10 points total firing, but now the French skirmishers have started to get into the woods as well. So it turns out it's only going to be a 1% chance to hit each of those, and only this skirmish brigade or skirmish stand here took a casualty. It had already taken one, so it was eliminated as well. So we take that one off. Alright, on the return fire from the French, both these guns were able to target the square. They got 6 points firing, but it was doubled because it's into a square formation. And doubled means it was 12 points, which is 1 automatic kill and a chance 2 of a second. They rolled the 2. That gave it its 3rd casualty, 2nd and 3rd casualty, and 3 casualties eliminates a unit. So this unit goes away. Now, at this point, the French could roll, or did roll, to kill a closest lieutenant. They failed on that. Earlier, the Allies had rolled to kill a lieutenant when that cavalry brigade was eliminated. They failed as well. There's only a 10% chance. All right, so that finished that. And then finally over here, we've got this battery, and it's going to go ahead and fire at the horse. Now it did move to get up there. It's at effective range, which would be a 4. Now it rolled, a 4 halved because its moves is going to be a chance 2, and it missed. And then over here, we now just have 2 stands of skirmishers firing. They're worth 2 points apiece. Split between those two, it's a chance 1 on each one. They missed against the infantry, but they got a second hit against the artillery battery, which eliminates the battery. So the battery's gone. Batteries being eliminated doesn't give you a chance of killing a lieutenant. All right, so that was all the combat that took place on that turn. So we'll go ahead and get ready for the next turn.